Hey friends, it's Andrew, and this is Serves You Right. I've spent over 20 years in the service industry, bartending, managing, barback, doing pretty much everything, and I've loved it. I've hated it too. I've learned a lot. In this podcast, I like to ask one main question. Can you really be happy working in this business? Can you grow, evolve, find a way to do something more if you want? I don't know, but that's what we're talking about here. Every week, I do 2 episodes. I talk to people from across the hospitality world and beyond. So far, I've got people from chefs, authors, former servers who've turned into entrepreneurs, lawyers, creators, and everything in between. I try to dive into what helped them, what could help you, what held them back, and what it really takes to build a better life. Whether that means mastering service or going beyond. This podcast is part personal journey, part conversation hub, honestly, part just what I'm interested in, so I hope you like it too. If you've ever felt stuck or sparked by the chaos in a restaurant, let's do this. Let's go. Today, I got a chance to talk to Tiki Lindy. So Tiki Lindy is the author of many books, a huge force in the world of tiki culture, and just a really fantastic conversationalist. I got to learn a lot about what you can and can't say about what tiki even means. We get to explore different drinks. I'm still in love with the drink I asked her about. Oh man, really fantastic person with really just a lot of insight and a really inspiring body of work. So this is a really great conversation. I hope you enjoy it too. Let's do it. All right. So today I have Lindy here with me. So welcome on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So if I could, you do so many different things and have done so many different things. What is the kind of common thread that ties together your whole body of work? And can you tell the listener kind of what you do? Yeah.
Yes, ties together. Well, I think a love for very nerdy, geeky level of conversation is actually what ties it all together. The quest for knowledge, right? So I think what also ties together is I got into bartending and the food industry really early on, like really young, as young as one can legally get into it. And so, but I grew up in the South, and there wasn't a cocktail culture really there. There wasn't even hot cuisine, so to speak. When the first sushi restaurant hit my town, that was a big deal. So I knew there were bigger and better things out there. So before I left the South, I was already kind of experimenting with what I could get my hands on just from watching things like PBS or, cooking shows or travel shows. And then flash forward when I moved to California in my 20s, it was kind of like, oh my gosh, it was a personal renaissance to be exposed to the craft cocktail scene, to the wine industry, to all these different multicultural food aspects. So my kind of love and passion for the hospitality industry continued. It just kind of morphed from being a job where I was, working my way through college to being something that was a passion.
Sure. No, it sounds like me and you have a very similar past. So I fell into a job as a barback in college, and then I just kept doing it over and over
Yeah.
again.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there were times when, I couldn't work in hospitality because my other, interests or schooling kind of prohibited, but I always came back to it in one form or fashion.
But remind me, you went to school, you were a pharmacist or
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm a doctor of pharmacy, so technically I should be Dr. Tiki Lindy, I suppose.
Okay. We can call you Dr. Tiki Lindy for
No,
sure.
that's okay. There's too many people that use the moniker doctor in the tiki world. I think there's a lot of doc so and so's, so I think I'm gonna steer clear of that commingling.
Fine, just being Tiki Lindy. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is no joke though. So I'm guessing, gosh, is that 10 years of schooling or?
It's a total of 8 years between undergraduate and graduate school. But it is I joke and always say it's all between bartending and pharmacy, it's all better living through chemistry. But
Fair, yeah.
it is a shockingly high amount of times I pull in some of the science information from my graduate schooling, my science schooling, into the talks I give on the
Mhm.
bartending, well, specifically on the cocktail world and food. Like there's a lot of science there. There's a lot of science behind taste and combining chemicals and everything from making clear ice to preserving things. It's all one form of science or another.
For sure, yeah. Um, so, you kind of mentioned that book, so I wanted to go down this rabbit hole if I could. So you have several books, but one of the things that really impressed me is, it's not just tiki cocktails, you're also tiki cuisine. And
Right.
definitely an area that is wildly underrepresented.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
that was actually why I wrote those. So at the
yeah.
time, so yeah, I brought my books. So yeah, my first book is the field guide. I don't know if it's backwards for your audience
Oh
members
no,
there,
that's
but
perfect. That's perfect.
so yeah, the field guide to Poopa's Tidbits and Exotic Provisions. That was my first book. And I started it in 2018. And the research went years before that. But when I entered, I kind of got known in tiki, and I was really into the tiki cocktail world. There was already a lot of books out there that published the same recipes, and it was really all building off of one person, Jeff Beachbum-Berry's research. I didn't want to be another person to just rob his work and make another book out of it. But what I noticed is that no one was really paying attention to this 70-year running cuisine that was being served at tiki restaurants. And so I wanted to see the lens of those recipes through a modern pantry. So, for example, the food that was being made back in the 30s and 40s was putting things like cream of mushroom soup. you know, not
Yes.
exactly
A
your
simpler time. Yes.
right, not exactly your classic Indonesian ingredient or your classic man. So I was like, that's the area that I really wanted to do the research was how can we bring things back to whatever their origin recipes were. But I needed a way to package them together because these recipes in the tiki world span a lot of different cultures. So Hawaiian, the Caribbean, um, Mandarin, Chinese food. So I was like, how do I put all these disparate regions together into one book? And I didn't really want to call it a tiki cookbook. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to take something that was already kind of a mismatch of identities. So I created this book as an adventure cookbook. So it has this storyline that's kind of ambiguously set back in the past, but you don't know how far in the past. And it's basically these explorers traveling around and their travel logs and the food they're being exposed to and the cultures. So yeah, it's kind of this fictional journal and the
Yeah.
ingredients, the recipes are strewn in there. And I had so much research, and the first book did so well that I did the second book on all the other kind of island culture food, which is well, actually I didn't grab that one. That's my compendium. It has the same kind of cover, but it's the compendium versus the field guides.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All of these are available on your website, which we will link in the show notes, just so everyone
Yeah.
listening. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. So I was gonna ask, like, is there a favorite moment or a favorite recipe you have in there, or something that really stands out? Like,
It's so hard. It's like asking, what your favorite child is in a way. I mean,
yeah.
because they span such a diverse range of cultures, I kind
Mm.
of have favorites. And my poor family, well, I shouldn't say poor. I think we all gained weight during the process of making those books as I kept on
Oh.
making, trying them out. But they were my test subjects. My family was my test subjects. So they have their favorites for sure. But the one,
Mm.
I think the kind of the moment where I realized I was doing something magical was my Dan noodles recipe.
Dan. No, can you
Yeah.
describe those for me?
So Dan noodles, they classically used like a Chinese egg style noodle. So kind of like what most people would think that ramen, like instant ramen noodles would look like, but fresh, but like a fresh, more yellow type of noodle. So it's that type of noodle, but it has true Szechuan peppercorns, which kind of have like a numbing heat to them. And it has like a ground pork and has a sesame paste in it. It has a lot of complex flavors. And every time I had dan dan noodles at a tiki restaurant, they kind of were flat. Like they were very Americanized. The flavor wasn't there. I did the research on this traditional Szechuan recipe for dan dan noodles, and when I ate it, it was just like the light bulb went off, and that gave me. I was like, this is why I'm making this book.
Yeah, I will have to warn you. I am a couple hours forward from you time wise and closer to dinner. So,
Oh, now I'm making you
yeah,
hungry. Yes,
I know. I'm like, oh my, yeah,
yes.
that sounds awesome.
Yeah,
Um,
they're very like warm and nourishing. So yeah, that's definitely. And people tell me oftentimes that have my book. They're like, yeah, it's one of our favorite
mhm.
recipes.
And you know, I was gonna ask you, you know, getting out there writing a book is a big task. What was it that inspired you? Like, have you always wanted to write a book, or was this something that just you saw an opportunity and you pounced, or?
I think it was more that I think I saw opportunity and pounced. I had never really thought of writing a book. Now, ironically, my father, my late father, he had authored a book, but it was on something so incredibly boring. He was a professor of accounting in a university, and he had wrote like an accounting textbook. And so I think I had an aversion to ever considering the fact I would write something. I didn't want to be in that same category of boring textbook.
Mhm. Balancing your budget for fun sort of thing.
Right. But no, I just it kind of came to a life of its own. I had always saved my recipes over the years,
Mm.
but they never really congealed to anything. And so this kind of gave me purpose to actually do something with recipes.
Oh, that's cool. That's really cool. And then the start of the book, I saw it was a Kickstarter, correct?
Yeah, yeah. The first one I did
Yeah.
Kickstarter. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think something crazy like 24 hours it was funded or something. Great. Yeah.
Yes, very quickly.
Yeah.
And I was floored. I mean, I knew there was nothing like it out there, and I knew the tiki community was large, but yeah, it was such a great response.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Um, I I don't think we really explored, so I was gonna circle back and ask again. Tiki. What got you into tiki? You know,
Oh my
was it one
goodness.
moment, a drink, a bar, like
Yeah, well, there's the long story and then there's the shorter story. I'm gonna try to hit the sweet spot in the middle. So again, having been a bartender in the past and in an area that was kind of devoid of real craft cocktail culture. So I grew up in Arkansas, and there's proximity to good whiskeys. So my first foray into kind of the spirits world was way more bourbon and whiskey. I moved to California and I got really into wine. So if you think about wine, it's an aged, it's maybe not a spirit, but it's an aged alcoholic product, right? So my knowledge of aged spirits and things like wine, whiskey, bourbon, scotch was really good. And that's kind of what the wheelhouse that I was in. And it was when I, like a lot of people, I went to Disneyland for the first time and went to the Enchanted Tiki Room. I was like, what is this? What is this tiki thing? And then the first time I went into Trader Vic's in Emeryville in California, which is, one of the a historic tiki bar, then it was like, okay, clearly this tiki thing is more than just this one off. So the more I did research into it, the more I kind of like looked at it, I was like, oh, there's this whole culture and then subcultures. And I was really fascinated by it. And that's when I really got more into rum. The rum I had been exposed to in college was like most of us, a Bacardi,
the things
yeah,
we regret? Yes.
yes, Captain Morgan, things that was a utilitarian. Let me just put that
Mhm.
way. So yeah, so I went down the nerdy path of exploring rums and the craft cocktails of the 30s, 40s, and 50s. And then I was like, yeah, this is awesome. I love this escapism. I love this community. I love this use of fresh ingredients and tropical ingredients. So yeah.
No, if we can actually pull at that thread for a few seconds, I don't think I really mentioned when we first talked. So I'm a bartender by trade who ended up now I'm in management, general manager of a restaurant,
Mhm.
but I love rum and I love introducing people to new rums. And I
Right.
feel like, drinking culture in America is so heavily steeped in either just wine or whiskey. And so many
Right.
people write off rum as that utilitarian, I think was a great adjective for that.
Yes. Yes.
Uh,
You know what I mean? To get drunk, a quick way to get drunk.
uh,
Yeah.
um, so I was gonna ask, do you have any favorite rums, or were there any like particular rums or drinks with rum that you would introduce people to new styles? Or that's
Oh,
kind of a
absolutely.
really broad question, but
It is a very broad question. Actually, there's a couple of ways. So people who are either new to tiki era cocktails or new to rum, I kind of have an approach a couple of different ways. So in the non-rum aspect, when people like, oh, I don't like tiki drinks, they're either too sweet or I don't like rum. So my introduction for those folks tend to be in non-rum tiki era drinks. So for example, the Saturn, which is an excellent gin drink, and it's served shaken and then up. So it's very elegant. It looks like something that they would order, like a gin drink that they would order at a fancy bar, and it's not going to have any of those characteristics that they automatically think they despise. That's kind of one direction. I also, for people like, oh, I don't drink rum. What do you drink? Oh, I drink whiskey. I'm like, okay, they're the easiest people to sell on rum because you just have to have the right rum. So most rums are very dry, so there's not added sugar. There may be very, very, very small amounts by some brands in order to kind of balance, kind of like they do with wine. But since rums are aged in ex bourbon barrels, ex whiskey barrels, ex sherry barrels, what you're tasting, like if you think about whiskey is just vodka that's been aged in a barrel.
essentially, yeah.
I mean, distilled beer, but it's basically something that comes out clear from the still, and then that flavor is coming out of the barrel. And it's the same with rum. You're just starting with cane. And so when people are like, well, I like whiskey, but I don't like rum, I just tell them they haven't had the right rum. So I don't have a favorite rum. I love the different characteristics of so many. Whether it's like an agricole rum from Martinique or a Demerara rum, which it just has like just such luscious flavors. Barbados rum, and of course Jamaican has that funky, deep notes that are such a great structure into a cocktail. So I like them all.
Sure, sure. No, and I like as you were talking there, I'm thinking in my head, it's something I had never thought before, but I think whiskey drinkers are a good like analogy to the world of rum. Because only in the world of whiskey do you get that sort of differentiation where you have the bourbons or the ryes or the scotches or the
Right.
Japanese, where rum you have so many different islands and so many different countries that you actually have a whole range to kind of play with.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's aside from the areas that are very French dominated, there really isn't the type of regulation in rum that there is in whiskey. So I think a lot of it is education of the American public on that aspect. Like, sure, if you're going to get an American rum, there could be wide variation of quality and flavor. But if you're looking to very specific areas, they are like places in the Caribbean, they're way more regulated to be able to call a Demerara rum or a Jamaican rum or an agricole rum. There's a lot more constraints, and so you're more likely to get the same kind of quality that you would out of a whiskey or a bourbon.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
And then correct me if I'm wrong. One of your books is Cocktail Book Two, correct?
Yeah, so
Yes. Okay. I
that's
wanted to
my
make sure.
latest book.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's the guide to tropical elixirs and exotic provisions, or
Oh,
exotic elixirs, sorry. And that is just came out recently. So yeah, and it's a fun cocktail book. So it still keeps that same, it keeps the same. I'm like trying to see if I can show this and they're still getting good and getting good resolution. But then it starts with some instructional, like the right kind of glassware to have, the right kind of tools to have. And then it gets into some storylines and the recipes themselves. And there's some great color photography of the cocktails, and it kind of follows like a passport style. So yeah, I wanted this again to be fun, and I also didn't want to republish other people's recipes. So this is genuinely a collection of 10 years of my own recipes that I've come up with. Some of them are tiki are inspired, but some of them are more classic cocktail riffs. So there's something for everyone in it. It's really fun.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you kind of touched on another thing that I did want to ask you about. Tiki is such a, steeped kind of in tradition, even though the tradition may be like 50 years old.
Right.
What, a lot of the things that I saw online about you are describing you as a tiki modernist. And so I was
Right.
like, how do those two things get juxtaposed? How does
I
that
know
like?
it almost doesn't it seem almost like an oxymoron, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is the challenge, and that's something I'm kind of I guess you could say controversial in a way for being in the tiki world, because how do you define what a tiki cocktail is? And if you start
That
going
was
down,
one of the questions I was going to ask you too.
yeah, so you have to choose this path. So the pathway I try to lead people down is, okay, so does it mean it was served during certain like eras? Like, okay, well, we've got cocktails outside of the tiki world that was served during those eras, so we know it's not era specific. Is it certain people specific? Is it only the recipes of Trader Vic and Don the Beachcomber? So if so, then anybody else's recipes would be excluded from being a tiki drink. Does it have to have rum in it? Well, if we're saying it has, both Trader Vic, Vic Bergeron and Don the Beachcomber, used other spirits other than rum in lots of their cocktails. Does it have to be from one geographic area? Well, that gets, we've got the Caribbean, we've got Hawaii, we've got Micronesia, Melanesia, Polynesia. So you start trying to define tiki, and nothing really, one thing sticks. But yet we have this innate sense of what separates a tropical cocktail from a tiki era cocktail. So you probably hear me say tiki era cocktail and not tiki cocktail, because I do not believe there's such thing as a tiki cocktail.
Okay.
There are cocktails that came about in the late 1930s through the 1950s, driven by these two kind of pioneers in this escapism world that brought these tiki bar iconic things in. But if you're stuck just making these people's recipes in perpetuity, what's the draw? You have no room for creativity. You have no room to take modern ingredients and reinvent some of the flavor profiles. And so I think that's what people call me a tiki modernist, is the things that we have available now are different than what they had then, and vice versa. So I try to reinvent some of those flavor profiles through the lens of what we have currently available.
I see. Okay. So that would make you a tiki air cocktail enthusiast. Maybe.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. Yeah. I was like, I want to watch my words very carefully here.
Yeah. And you can't talk about tiki without talking about the difference between cultural misappropriation and cultural appreciation. And it is a tough line to toe. And I think education is the main thing that goes behind that, like understanding that the term tiki is almost like a religious term, like the Maori culture. So that's also why I don't say like a tiki cocktail unless you see like a deity from New Zealand holding a cocktail.
Yes.
So I try to tread very lightly there, understanding that when we talk about tiki culture in the United States, it is something completely different from Polynesian. It is its own Americanized, Disneyized, Hollywoodized combination of all these different exotic cultures. And when you understand that is tiki culture, then you can understand you're not stepping really into the authenticity of specific island cultures.
Okay. I think I can follow that. I think that answers my question. It does kind of remind me, do you know the whole, I'm gonna butcher, I can't remember the Supreme Court justice that said it, but there's a Supreme Court case where they were ruling on what obscenity or profanity or pornography was. And he said
Right.
the Supreme Court justice says, "I know it when I see it," and that's kind
Right.
of what I was reminding me of Tiki. And like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
oh
Well, that's
man,
that's a whole nother there's this whole I guess you could say discussion group or about what makes a tiki bar a tiki bar.
Mm.
And does it have to have fish floats? Does it have to have thatching? Does it have to have a tiki statue? What makes a tiki bar? And that becomes one of those is a hot dog a sandwich? Have you ever heard that?
No, but that's a good analogy, actually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's the whole, like, if you ever want to
Mhm.
just annoy your friends, you ask them if a hot dog is a sandwich and then debate that through. So it's a similar, like, there is actually not a right or wrong answer, but most people would say they'll know it's a tiki bar when they see
I
it.
know, yeah. But on the other side of that, if I was to argue for the hot dog, if we were in just a normal bar and you were behind the bar making some amazing tiki or style cocktails, I'd
Right.
probably say this is a great tiki environment, even though the
Right.
decoration and the decor did not match what was going on.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
some of the top award-winning bars in the nation have never claimed themselves to be a tiki bar. So one in particular, so Navy Strength in Seattle, a very acclaimed bar. They never called themselves a tiki bar, but their cocktails have very much taken influences from the Caribbean and have been very rum focused, but people labeled them as a tiki bar and they never did. So it's a very interesting scenario.
For sure.
Yeah.
If you had a choice, if you could only cocktails or only of the food side, which would you have chosen? Or is that a hard,
Oh,
like you
that's
can't do one without the other? Or
oh gosh. I know. I mean, I think I would have to say the food side over cocktails. I think everyone can deal without alcohol.
yes, everyone can survive without a drink. No one can survive
Yeah,
without food.
yes. I'm this may be blasphemous in the cocktail or in the cocktail world, but I'm a foodie first. I think
Yeah.
you can't really be truly into cocktails without kind of also being a foodie. I mean, it is
Mm.
it is food ingredients that go into it. So I'm definitely a foodie.
Well, yeah. It should be edible food ingredients that go into it
Yeah.
if you were doing the right way. Yeah.
Right.
Yes. Um, I did want to ask you one thing that as I was looking through some of your posts on Instagram, I saw you had a drink on there called the Nutcracker Old Fashioned.
Mhm.
And I like, where can I find that recipe? That looks so good.
Depending on
Um,
how I'm not even sure I remember what is in that, but yeah, oftentimes sometimes I will post recipes in my Instagram, more
mm.
often the stories so that they're fleeting and not too
Oh,
often in the posts themselves, like in the actual posts. But yeah, I'm sure, hit me up afterwards and I'll dig up the
if it's
recipe
if
for
that's something
you.
somewhere that
Yeah, yeah.
so
But the best way for people to get other than my cocktail book, I do a lot of presentations at
Mhm.
primarily Tiki events. So Tiki Oasis in Arizona. There's another one in San Diego. Inu Hale's in Atlanta, Georgia each year. So I'm oftentimes an invited speaker. And those cocktail seminars, I provide recipes for the cocktails that I'm talking about and I'm presenting about. So that's one way folks can
That's
find my
probably the best
recipes.
way. Yeah.
It's probably the best way, but also in social media. It's just,
Mhm.
I do keep a lot of that stuff very close to me, my
Sure,
recipe.
sure. I mean, yeah, you work hard for it. It looks delicious, so I'm sure it tasted just as good. And just to be clear for everyone listening too, several of the drinks did look good. That was just the one that I saw and I was like,
Flex
I
on
have to
too.
see if I can get this recipe.
I'm sure I could dig it up for you. Yeah.
Yeah. My wife is a Russian, and the joke with Russians is Americans have a sweet tooth and they have 32. So it
Yeah.
just looked like the sort of thing I could make for her. But
Yeah. Exactly.
um, I'm glad you mentioned doing your presentations because I did want to ask you. I saw I think one of the more recent ones was a whole one on spice.
Right.
And
Yeah.
what is it like to give a whole presentation about just spice? I think it was Jamaican spice or
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. So, I mean, for me, it's great. I guess my audience likes it too. So I've been I've been given kind of the moniker of the Alton Brown of the cocktail world because I tend to roll very, very sciency in my presentation. So I'm not just up there talking about my opinions. I'm actually delving into some of the food anthropology and and the science that goes behind it. And people tend to just like eat it up. They love it. They come for that nerdiness. So yeah, for me, it's easy to talk for an hour about spices. But in the context of like the cocktail world, there's a clear correlation. You may have heard the term "what grows together goes together." Have you ever heard
Oh
that
yeah.
term?
Mhm.
There's, I have definitely found that doesn't always hold true,
Sure.
but for the most part, it does, and especially for things that when you're talking about the depth of flavors in Jamaican rums, they tend to refer to some of the spice notes, and they happen to be spices that also grow in Jamaica. So cinnamon, allspice, nutmeg, mace, like these types of things all kind of grow and do well in Jamaica. And so you not only do you find those notes in some of the rums, but in terms of ingredient to pair them with, they're kind of natural pairings. So I kind of, I went into kind of the cultural anthropology, where these spices come from and how did they get to where they went to? How do you mix with them? How do you make
Oh,
syrups?
cool.
I also talked about how you can make syrups and tinctures with some of those. So yeah, it spans. I'm able to kind of take a topic like that and go in a lot of different directions.
Sure. Yeah. Um, well, actually, that did remind me of a question I wanted to ask you about your cocktail book. Um, if you were to rate it on ease of execution for like the average at-home person, like I've definitely gotten books where it's like 5 or 6 drinks have a compound like vanilla and like passion fruit syrup and like, and then I've definitely got the other side where it's just all classic. So where do you fall in that kind of realm?
So I intentionally try to make it approachable.
Okay.
When there is something that you can't commercially get, I've provided the recipe to make it, and they're not
Hmm.
things that are too obscure. So I try to approach it from, okay, who is most my audience? Americans, most likely. And so what's in the American pantry? What's available? Some things you may have to go to like a Mexican market or an Asian market to get the ingredients, but they're fairly widely available. And the ones that are a little more obscure, there's just a lot fewer of those recipes in the book so that people wouldn't be put off by it. So, if we're talking like a scale of 1 to 5, if one being like your very entry level bartender and 5 being, people who are clarifying and, know how to
Yeah.
have like
A full-on
a
mustache in there in San
right,
Francisco.
like a
Yes.
food dehydrator and like a,
Yeah.
I don't know, sous vide. It's more of a 2, 3. I wanted to make it very approachable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Mhm.
Um, I know that the listener at home is probably going to want to know this. So, orgeat, is that how you say
Yeah.
it?
You said it perfectly. Yeah.
Yes.
Great.
Okay.
It's a
I
French word.
practiced before here. I was panicked, but I wanted to go for it. So
Yeah.
the listener, that's that orgeat looking word
Yeah.
that you see through all these
Or
cocktails.
get. I hear or
Uh-huh.
get.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. Any strong opinions on how to pronounce falernum? Is there
Well,
a
you
correct
pronounced it
way?
correct. That
Okay.
is, falernum, and that's I'm taking my opinion from both a panoply of bartenders, career bartenders, but also in the Caribbean, since I have spent time there, and how they're locally pronouncing it too. So falernum is kind of the generally accepted
Per-
pronunciation.
Perfect. You know,
Yeah.
it sounds silly, but it is important, I feel like. I usually don't put French wines by the glass because they don't sell as well because people are afraid to pronounce them, honestly.
Oh,
It's
interesting. Yeah,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that's funny. This is a total tangent, but one of my favorite wines, most people won't order because of that. So it's called Aglio Nico.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, from Greece. Oh
Yeah,
yeah. That's
Nico is
awesome.
actually a really good old world wine, but a lot of people won't order because they don't know how to
Yeah.
pronounce
It's like
it.
a Certico. I'll just it's Chardonnay. It's Chardonnay's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah.
Yes. No. I did also want to ask you, I had a question I feel like I may know, but I was surprised. Why are the books not on Amazon? Was that a deliberate choice or
It was a deliberate
uh,
choice. Yeah, I mean, Amazon takes a pretty hefty cut of things.
yeah.
So yeah.
Jeff
Uh,
Bezos has enough money, so
right. But
you know.
my first two books are available on Barnes and Noble though. So that,
Oh, good to
yeah,
know.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I think right now technically there's it's shipping faster ordering from my website than it is through Barnes and
Mhm.
Noble. But yeah, and that's kind of my eventually my cocktail book, The Guide to Tropical Potions and Exotic Elixirs will be on Barnes and Noble as well. So yeah.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I one of those that I wrote it down. And I was like, I think I probably will know the answer to this, but you
Yeah.
know that you never know. There might be some sort of fight or some sort of really juicy backstory. So
I wish. No, it just
yes.
was not economical
Was
to
when I went to high school with Jeff, he was not very forgiving of the tiki cocktails. So so yeah.
that would have been a funny story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Linda, what are you up to now? Or is there anything exciting coming up or yeah.
Yeah, let's see. What do I have that's exciting? Well, I'll be presenting at Tiki Oasis in San Diego. That's running, I
Sure.
believe, August 4th through 9th. Actually not sure yet what I'm presenting on. Tends to be
Fun.
that, yeah, I know. Oftentimes that they just say, hey, or I'll pitch some ideas and they'll say, yeah, we love this one. Or they'll say, can you talk about X, Y, and Z? So yeah, it's exciting unknown topic, but that will be in San Diego. And yeah, I'm kind of just holding up locally and working on where I'm going to head next. I'm not sure if I have another book in the works, but I said that last time, and I have 3 books. So,
Yes. Your friends and family want more recipes. So
well, yeah, I
yes.
did best. My daughter, who's now 16, but when my first book, when we were doing the test recipes, she was 11, and when we took that last picture, so I'd made the recipes, and then we had to made them again to take the photographs. She said, "Oh, but I don't want the tiki lifestyle to end." The tiki lifestyle.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. You have a legacy to live up to, young one.
Apparently, yes. So to
Yes.
her, eating tiki, recipes each night was the lifestyle.
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you for joining us. It was a real pleasure to talk to you
Yeah,
today. So,
likewise.
if you enjoyed this, please leave a review, like, share. The more people that we can reach, the more people we can help, and the more people we can bring this message to, a message of hope and possibilities in the service industry. Everyone who listens, thank you. You are my people. Keep rocking on and have a great service. And please come back and listen again. We send out new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday. How about that? All right, see you soon.